Good day, everyone. My name is Tim Selden. I'm the president of the Montessori Foundation. We are a independent school consulting group. We started working with Montessori schools, but we work with independent schools of all sorts, magnet schools, public schools all over the world. And this is a jointly sponsored webcast that I do with my friend Clint Lausch from the Montessori Growth Suite. Clint?
Hey everybody, thanks Tim. And yeah, if you've been watching these for a while, I've been following my emails. About 2 years ago now, launched the admissions inquiry marketing software AIMS. We recently did some rebranding, and now it's called the Growth Suite. To kind of reflect really what we're hoping to do with schools, which is have an all-in-one solution to help you grow from the advertising and marketing and admissions and tuition and SIS and fundraising and everywhere in between. So that's what we're doing now. And yeah, it's great to be here for another webcast. And maybe towards the end of today, we'll talk about some other announcements. We got a lot of really great content coming up. I know we have our Thursday webinars now, so make sure everybody's getting those invites. We're going to have a discussion forum, like an online discussion forum where we're hopefully going to bring together thousands of private school leaders in all different roles and schools at a great place for to share tips, advice, get feedback. So really looking to continue to collaborate with everybody, even beyond our sessions here. And diving into today's topic, this is such an important one, especially on my end and working with so many schools on their marketing plans, their marketing campaigns. Usually the conversation is around, hey, we've got seats to fill. How are we going to do that? Or we're doing our website. What's the website going to look like? Or we want to run ads and, let's get some images. But at the foundation of all marketing and all of your communication is your messaging frameworks and who you are and who you serve and how to make that different than the school down the street. Because there's a couple that, well, I always think there's this old saying of, if you confuse you lose, right? So clarity is going to attract who you want, so making sure you're very clear in who you're communicating to. But the other thing is, especially nowadays, gosh, families are comparing more schools than ever at one time, right? They're applying to 4, 5, 6 different schools, going to a lot of different websites. We're seeing more ads than ever. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, because I think it's actually easier to differentiate these days, because I feel like a lot of school messaging these days sounds the same. Hey, this is our student to teacher ratio, and you say things like experience the X school with an insert school name, experience the blank school, or um, whole child development, things like that, which it means something, but everybody is saying the same thing, right? Nurturing environment, academic excellence, the list goes on. We could probably all maybe look at it and say, oh yeah, that probably sounds like everybody else. But I think it gets at the core of, okay, how do we differentiate? And I'm going to come at this, and Tim, I'll toss it your way, because in a second here, because your messaging, especially when we started working together, even on the our original ad campaigns, your messaging was already so unique. So I always love having you on here and talking about this topic, because you come at it with different angles that are so unique. I remember, just as an example, talking about Montessori schools, it was like, I remember one thing that always stuck in my head, which was like, well, what did you say? Was it like math at age 2 or something like that? Right? Things like that. Like, calling that out. Like, nobody else is doing that. Everybody else is saying the same thing about how, why this is different, but the messaging needs to be different. And where I was going with this is, I'm going to come at this from the angle as well of, because I own this software platform, and in so many schools, hundreds of schools now are running their ad campaigns through the platform. I get to see what's working, right? I get to see what's working, what isn't. And I will say there is a very common theme, especially when it comes to advertising, of a framework that, when in doubt, you use this framework, it typically works. It's hard to say, well, it's going to work every single time, but without fail, it it works pretty frequently. And whenever I'm working with a school on their campaign, we usually always start here. So we'll get to that today. But Tim, thoughts on messaging? How do you come up maybe with your messaging? And then we'll dive in, and I would love to start opening this up for conversation. But Tim, I always thought your messaging was so unique, with whatever campaign. Any thoughts on in general about unique messaging, how you come up with it, and maybe why it's so important?
Well, my first thought is that most schools really don't know how to write their own messaging because you're too close to it. We love our schools. We know all about it. We hear from parents who are generally very, very happy, and we just kind of assume that people out there are going to get it, and sometimes they do, but it is absolutely true. Most powerful way to get new parents is for a current parent or a past parent to say the school my kids attend or the school they went to is incredible. You're going to love it there. And I think you're going to love it there is one of the biggest themes because parents, generally speaking, don't think of schools and love. But you've got to remember your competition is free. People have already paid for public schools through their tax dollars. So, lots of private schools of different sorts in most communities. Some are pushing, faith-based education. Some are pushing basic. Some are pushing college acceptance. I mean, there's no one formula. But the bottom line is you got to ask yourself, why would anyone love your school? What makes you different? And you might think it's your location or your campus or your pottery program, your I don't know. Lots of different things bring people in. But you've got to always remember, probably in most parts of the world, the government schools have more money and they often are doing similar things, except they're not similar. And so you've got to figure out why would anyone spend the kind of money that we charge to come to our schools? What's drawing them in? What problem are they trying to solve, even if they can't articulate it? And my point with you, Clint, I've seen it with myself, with my school at times. I see it at the Montessori Foundation. In fact, you helped me out with something just the other day. You get too close to your own situation. So often, what you need to do is, first off, in my opinion, be outrageous. The more outrageous you are, the more likely you are to make the phone ring. And secondly, you've got to be clear about what is it you're trying to catch their attention with, and it's got to be consistent, and it's got to be believable. People have got to say, yeah, I think what they're describing syncs out with reality, what I read on the reviews online and so forth. If people are saying something totally different than what you're saying, at the very least, expect people to wonder what's the truth. And so again, why does anyone come to one of our schools?
What do you think is a good starting point? I have some ideas, and things that I've recommended, but and maybe that's one of the things we'll dive into today, and we can start opening it up. But if you were to sit down with a school right now, how would you start? Right? How would you start building out really great messaging?
Well, I always start by saying, tell me, I want to start recording our conversation and I'm going to really, really listen to it. But tell me about your school. Tell me about what kind of parent comes here. Tell me about what makes the program special, the teachers special, the facilities special. Why do you think people come? Then I go and I look online and I look to see how is this school describing itself. At this point, I'm beginning to get a picture. Then I say, have you done any surveys of your parents? And if so, can you provide me the raw data so we can do a deep analysis of it? And how many years can you give me? Then the next thing I do is I go online to see what people say about school. And usually what you're going to see there is the things that people were unhappy about. It's much easier for people to either blow smoke up your ear, they just say how wonderful you are, or they complain. Everything that they didn't like gets recorded on Niche or Yahoo. And so you look for the patterns. But what I really like to do, if a school is serious, is having done everything else and done a deep dive into talk to me about where you have holes, talk to me about when people start applying, what is the size of your waiting list? Can anyone get on the waiting list, or do they have to be accepted first? Do they have any skin in the game? Have they paid to be on the waiting list? How much are they paid? In other words, how serious are the people that are swimming around your boat? Do they really want to be with you? And typically it's a mixed bag. That we got holes in our middle school in the last couple of years, or we're having trouble recruiting kindergarten, get whatever. It changes according to the local economy and the climate and demographics. We start with where do people think are their holes and their strengths. And then ideally, what we do is we start doing charrettes. We start holding meetings of the current parents and teachers of the school. We try to get as close to 100% participation as we can. So usually this takes 5 to 10 meetings recorded and then analyzed to get a pretty good picture of what people really think when you have a 1 hour conversation and you get beyond the fluff, and people are really saying, what do they like? Where are the pain points? What aggravates them? Why do they choose this school? What are the competition? You start getting a better and better picture of why people are making the decision. And that really gives you opportunities to look for the unique messaging to do it. And sometimes people in a school do have clarity. I mean, they just kind of know we're the school for the child who's loved, or we're the school where thinking goes to school, or we're the only authentic Montessori school in Broward County, or whatever it is that you think causes people to come to you. And you may be right, you may be wrong, but you got to start by gathering as much data as you can.
I love the idea of recording those sessions, because nowadays it's so easy to take a recording, get the transcript, and you can do a lot of cool things with it, like toss it into AI and let it analyze it for you. We'll get into some AI ideas here in a second, but is there anybody else go through an exercise? Has anybody done that already or thinking about doing it? Which is, whether it's building a mission statement, doing your portrait of a graduate statements, building out your messaging. Is there any activities that or formal things that you put together to start building that out?
Silence.
Not for my current school, but it is something that is on our summer to-do list that we really need to pin it down. But I know for a long time within our grouping of schools, really coming up with a solid, unique value proposition was like the content of every meeting for a while. And I think it's really important to do that deep dive. It's just such a big, daunting task that sometimes I feel like it's just hard to get started and hard to know where to start collecting that data. But I like the idea of just starting to collect the data and see first where that goes. Maybe we have enough data, maybe we need more data. And we have a 3-year kind of planning committee which includes parents. But I think the idea of doing some sort of focus groups is probably a good thought also.
As an aside, Jody, it's something the foundation does for schools. We help
Okay.
people develop marketing plans and clarify their messaging, and try to get parents and teachers to speak honestly about what's working and what could be better, and why do they think people choose one particular school versus another. So it's a service we do, and I can only say again, you can't typically scratch your own back or give yourself a massage.
Yeah.
Typically, we need someone else to help us figure it out to do it really, really well, which is
Mhm.
why ad agencies exist.
Yeah.
Is they usually both have skilled graphics people, but also skilled people who help you figure out what's the message, what's the unique thing that you could say that
Mhm.
drives home who you are.
Yeah.
Jody, have you, or again, anybody else on here, as you're starting to think about, putting together that type of messaging, do you have any, because starting anything, like especially with this, it is daunting. Like, where do we start? Do you have any survey data? Have you thought about doing survey data or doing surveys if you have it?
There are a multitude of different kinds of surveys that the school has done, I think, over the last few years. So there is data out there. I don't know like how congruent like the sets of data would be. I don't know that we could like say that it was scientific in terms of, but just as far as kind of gathering up opinions of people of what our strengths have been, where our pain points are, I think that there is information out there. Getting through that information also is kind of another, and possibly using AI. I have thought about that. I've thought of like maybe that is a good way to sort of sort through it, sift through it, see what comes up a lot. The Archdiocese of Chicago asks all of the schools to do a 5 essentials survey through the University of Chicago. So there is a lot of good information from parents and employees and some kids. So that probably would be a really good place to start to look for that.
Well, again, you're part of a faith-based community, as I recall, in the Chicago area. And, we've seen, of course, the parochial schools do some really, really innovative messages. Figuring out a way to update that for today's population, also thinking about who you're trying to attract, and it could be,
So
we don't
true.
care. Because if the kids come in as Aquinas said, from 0 to 6, they're mine for life. Um, it could be that you're fine with that. It could be that the parish wants to attract more people who are practicing in the faith. Um, However it is, you always look at what's working and where would you like to improve? Like if you're bleeding off kids at a certain age, or if you're not getting kids at a young enough age, you try to figure out, well, okay, where are our unique selling features
Mm,
that might bring in more people? The other
mhm,
thing is if you've got room in a school for, let's say, 500 children, and if you have a vacancy rate of about 10% in a year, well, that's, 10% is 50 children. And if your school is bringing in, let's say, 1,000 a month or 15,000 a year or whatever it is, that's a lot of money. And
mhm,
so money spent on marketing support and attempting to make sure that no space goes unfilled in any year and minimizing the turnover because you have to resell people or they drift away. They find something that seems better.
The grass is always greener, right?
Grass is always greener. Somebody's always discovered some new magnet school or school for the arts or bilingual school, whatever. And we lose people all the time. And it's so much easier to keep the existing customer than it is to bring in a brand new family and convince them to sign
Mhm,
up. And then you've
mhm,
got to get a child used to the community.
mhm,
And the teachers have to get to know this child. It's so much better if you get lifers.
mhm. Agree.
Have again, Jody, anybody else, have you started to put together parent, personas of your ideal family? If anybody's ever Googled the concept of, building a um, customer persona or ideal, in our case, obviously customers are parents, but in the general marketing world, the idea of customer personas is not new. And if you Google it, you will come up with about 1 million different templates for it. But has anybody ever done the persona work, building personas? I think that is probably, and maybe we start our conversation there because there's probably 1 million different places that we could go in terms of providing some guidance into building frameworks. Because what I would love to do is maybe end today with getting, because there are actual proven frameworks like fill in the blank type templates that you really can't go wrong with when you're doing your messaging. But how do we get there? And it really all starts with your ideal parent persona. Who's the ideal parent to you? What are they looking for? Um, what excites them? What don't they want? That sometimes is just as important. And thinking about starting that starting that type of work. I think about talking with schools, even starting with, like, let's use Montessori schools, right? Which is, okay, one parent persona is the parent who knows they want Montessori. Okay, you're going to communicate to them a little bit differently than you're going to communicate to the parent, because, by the way, we all likely have two, three, four ideal family personas, right? It's not just, hey, there's the one parent and that's it. There are parents that come in looking for different things and have different starting points. And it actually is important, especially when we start thinking about advertising, about speaking to all of those. And it actually is a good time to, we don't just want to be focused on one, because, like I said, parents are coming in with different expectations, different needs, different frustrations. So it's good to think about, what are the three kind of core personas of families. So again, it could be, there's the family who knows they want Montessori. Okay, let's use that as a starting point. How are we going to differentiate our Montessori from the others, right? So that's one. Two, it could be they're looking at all different types of private schools, right? Maybe they're even looking at a homeschool. How does what then that's more of a why Montessori conversation, right? Then there's but we can equate this to everybody. If you're a single sex school, why all girls versus co-ed? Right? You might be marketing to a family who, oh, we know we want an all girls school. Great. Here's why our all girls school is great. Or it's like all girls versus co-ed. What should you choose? Right? So that's usually a good starting point. And then you have to start putting together the why, right? What are the outcomes and how do we achieve it? And for some of you that have, been on sessions with me before where I've talked about messaging, here's a really good exercise I like to go through. And it sounds kind of simple, but when you break it down this way, I think it can help prompt you in terms of um, building your messaging for anything. So let me share my screen real quick. So I just have a white canvas here. So let's see. I don't use this often. Let's see if I don't mess it up. So we've got our parent. Here we go. Here's our parent. Actually, hold on. We're going to do this a little bit differently. We've got our parent. Let's do this.
I recognize that person anywhere. I mean,
I think so. We've got our frowny face. We've got our frowny face parent, right? This is the parent who they're looking for something, right? They're trying to identify that best fit school. And when at this stage they have questions, right? So, or frustrations, think about what are those common frustrations or things that are questions that parents are asking on those tours or when they call, right? And it could be, my child is bored, right? Tired of one size fits all. Right now, that's a little, let's see if we can make this a little bit thicker here. There we go. Tired of one size fits all, right? And start shouting some of these out. What else? I want a school that prepares my child for college. So college prep, still a big deal. It's one of those things where we know from survey data that, if you have a high school and families are looking to switch, it's usually something related to college prep, something like that. All right. What else? What are other common objections, questions that parents might have that they're looking for?
Well, these days it's going to often be politics.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids exposed to that liberal stuff. I don't want them exposed to that conservative stuff. It's going to be faith.
Right. So I'm looking for, and I'll put like insert approach, right, which is progressive, right, conservative, religious, right? Whatever you want to put, you know, we'll just put dot dot dot, right? Okay, great. What else?
I'm working parent. I can't have my kids going to the public schools. First off, they always have holidays, and it's impossible. Or there's teacher strikes, Chicago, or I need some. I can't even get from the office until 6 o'clock. I want to know they're safe.
Mhm.
School
I
shooting,
think
other thing. Please, Jody, jump
safety
in.
for sure. I was going to say differentiation, teaching to my specific child's needs. Maybe my child is low, maybe my child is high. How are you going to reach both ends of that? Student support.
Yep.
My child needs discipline, order, and structure versus my child can't sit still in a desk all day. He's got to have a hands-on learning approach.
Mhm.
Perfect. Yeah, so we could likely, just keep going with these, but I think this is a good start, right? These are all things we probably hear. And so we want to essentially address the problem, whether you want to label it as a problem or not, but address the problem, address the question. And then on the other end, let's have our happy parent. So we have our happy parent now. This means they went to your school, they've graduated, and now what have they achieved? Right? They're able to, what are they able to do now? Give me some phrases. Or yeah, give me some ports of your graduate statements, or if
Uh,
thinking about your school, what are they able to do now that they couldn't do before, or that solves some of these problems?
Engaged, good analytical thinkers.
Thinker,
Um,
become a leader, even saying things like get into top
Top schools.
I will say top high schools and
Yeah.
colleges. I know that this is a challenge. The top high schools. There's a school that I work with who they go up to eighth grade and they're losing kids in that middle school year because they're like, "Ooh, I'm not sure if you're going to prep me for high school, right?
Mm.
I want to go to that school that's going to prep my child." So overcoming that, so addressing that head on is important.
Mhm. I like to also differentiate between not only just getting into the top high schools, but being successful at the top high schools.
Hmm.
That sort of speaks to the high test scores that get you in, but also the soft skills that help you succeed.
Sure. What else? What are some
I-
tangible things that we can say?
Like a variety of experiences, they've been able to explore their interests, maybe that through enrichment, through school leadership programs, through maybe travel opportunities at some schools.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, yeah, we can keep going, right? With
In our
these.
case,
So
and probably in Montessori case too, just those good values based, the being, a great citizen, kind, um, service oriented, that kind of thing.
perfect. So put service oriented. Okay, these are great. These are great. All good stuff. Now, what we can do is, and this gets more into developing messaging type frameworks for addressing a specific type of persona of family. But let's focus on one of these. Let's pick one and run with it. And I want to, and there's one that fits in perfectly because I'm just helping the school with this campaign, which is they know through their survey data, why do families choose, what are they looking for? And this is a school that goes up to 12th grade. And they were looking for a school that was prepping them for college. But so they wanted to address that on one end. But on the other end, they wanted to address how they're definitely more of a progressive school, but they don't want it to feel like it's a they're coming into like a wood chipper type school, right? They want to feel like there's a great community here, inclusive community that also focuses on academics. So really overcoming that type of objection. I'm going to show you some of the exact messaging that we chose, but I want to use that as the example because what we can say is, hey, families, are you looking for a school that prepares your child for college? When you come to this school, you're going to be able to get into the top colleges, be successful, be a leader. We can say all these things, and we'll go dig into this a little bit deeper. But here's what we have to do. We can't just say these things. We can't just say they're going to get into a top school. The way to differentiate is we have to lay out the milestones. What is it about your school, your curriculum, your programs that allows them to go from having this frustration or having this question to realizing, oh, this is the solution, right? So is it I don't know, mentoring, right? Is it, I don't want to say small class sizes because everybody says small class sizes and it's not a differentiator anymore. But maybe it's certain experiences, right? There's a school I work with as well that talks about the entire city of Toronto is your campus. We're going to go out into Toronto, we're going to experience campus experience, go into businesses and doing things that, obviously is a much different than going to any other school. So, I won't go through each one of these, but this is a really good exercise, frowny face and smiley face aside, that you're building a bridge between the parent who's got a million questions, they're looking for that right fit school, to how to position yourself as, here's what they're going to become and here's how we do it. Tim, any thoughts on this, or is it, I don't know if you've done it,
Well, I
something
mean,
like this or something similar?
this is a core experience. I mean, the creation of the profile of the graduate, the profile of the ideal family, profile of the ideal incoming student at different ages. These are all really important. And again, you're using great examples of how you begin to tease it out for your school. What you have to remember though is there's what you have in mind, and then there's what your teachers are really thinking and saying to
Yeah.
themselves and to the parents behind your back. And then there's what the parents are saying. And they're not always in alignment. And I think that's one of from my experience, it usually helps. There's a reason why consultants will usually come into a school and want to do a major 360 institutional assessment to double check whether what your board thinks and your admin team thinks is really consistent with what seems to be reality on the ground.
I'm so glad you brought that up because man, I couldn't agree more, right? I sat in so many workshops and worked with a lot of consultants, and I got to hear with what a lot of schools have said, and I always remember this one that was like, they always said that marketing was so hard at their school because everybody at the school felt it was marketing's job to market, when in reality marketing is everybody's job, because if a teacher is talking with a parent, they're marketing the school, right? And so getting alignment so that everybody's essentially saying the same thing, that the boy, the head of school isn't telling him one thing and then the teacher's like, well, really, it's not like that. You don't want to, and then the parents are saying another thing. You don't want to, get in that situation. So whatever messaging you come up with, whatever exercise you use, you want to get alignment. So I think one of the, and Tim, I'm going to come back to you because I would love to know, what you do when going through that 360, because that's so important. But you have to get the data first, right? Have to get data first, because Tim, I think what you said is perfect, which is everybody on here sitting might have their own idea about what their top three. Going back to our frowning face, smiley face, building the bridge here. Everybody in here probably has their own opinion of what this might be. But in reality, you have to ask your parents. And the example that always sticks in my head of the school that I was working with, where they thought that a big differentiator for them, like thinking about what you're able to do, or like one of the big milestones, they thought it was their outdoor classrooms because they wanted to differentiate from the public schools. That was their competitor schools. Like, well, we've got these outdoor classrooms. It's a totally different experience. This is going to be so much different than the public schools. Ran ads, they did okay, not great. But through the survey data, they found out that the number one thing why school parents chose their school was this: safe community. That was it. So we had to come up with all new ad campaigns that was focused on this messaging. Well, not necessarily saying, hey, we're safe, but you want to give examples. So, okay, if you say we're in a great community, are you looking for an amazing small community where your child can thrive and be happy and look forward to going to school every day? Right? Those are all things that go into that concept. And then you say, you can say we have that. That's why parents choose us, but how do you do it? Right. So that's where we get back to. So have to get the data first. So how do we get the data? Again, to Tim, what you had said, which is, record focus group sessions,
Yeah, except
surveyed.
that you gotta remember, parents don't want to say the truth. Very, very few parents will tell you the straight skivvy because they don't want you upset with them. They don't want their kid to be mistreated. They want you to love. In other words, until they're admitted to a new school or they've made their decision or until it's almost the last minute when they can do it, most parents will leave in the middle of the night with a Dear John note. So getting accurate data out of them, I'll love you forever. I think you're the best school around, unless they're angry, in which case they're more than happy to tell everyone who will listen, especially on social media, about why they hate that school.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
you have to try to tease out that data.
outsiders almost always are more likely to get real data than the people they interact with every day. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. I mean, when I was with independent school management, the survey department was probably the one department that was the most flooded. They were like, they had like a 6 month backlog of getting parent satisfaction, student satisfaction survey data for good reason because it's so important. Um, and then the nice part is now, however you get that data, now we can use AI to analyze the data,
Mhm.
right? I remember doing this with a school. I said, "Hey, do you have some data?" Well, yeah, we've got. They sent over an Excel file or a Google sheet with hundreds of parent responses to questions. Why did you choose us? Other parents, hey, why did you leave? What were you looking for? And you can now run this through AI, upload it, and say, what are the top 3 reasons why families choose us? What's the messaging that we should use to communicate with those families? So if you're not, is anybody here using AI to do this messaging, whether it's analyze data or do maybe I should have even started there. Is anybody using AI? Man, use AI. It is so good right now.
Yeah.
It is so good. It's only going to get better. I remember doing this, having this conversation back in early 2024 when AI was just kind of making it out into the public. And look, it was great then because it was so new. But where it is now from messaging, especially because the big complaint was, well, it's very generic what it spits out, right? The outputs are only as good as the inputs and blah blah blah. Oh man, it is so good right now, especially if you give it some example data and you to do analysis, it's so good. If you're not using it, use it. It is truly like having, a really well-trained intern or assistant sitting next to you every single day. Um, yeah, it's great. So get the data, analyze the data. So when we analyze the data, what we're looking for are, again, top 3 reasons why our school. If you have exit data, why did you leave? What are you looking for? Right? So that's what we want to start getting. And then what you want to do is build at least 3 parent personas off of that data,
Mhm.
right? So we could go back to ChatGPT. I'll hop into ChatGPT. Let me just start a new chat. And
Yeah,
this will be very generic
Lynn, as you, I
because,
just want to remind everyone of one thing that you said. When you were working for independent school management, the survey department was very, very busy. There was a lot of interest in it. The reason why is ISM was a third party inviting people to tell the truth in a confidential manner. That is the secret. It's both the crafting of the right questions, and it's people knowing that the data is going to somebody who is not going to reveal it to the school. That's number one. Number two, they also want to know that if I take the time to tell the truth, not only will I not get in trouble, but that actually will go helpful.
yep, 100%. 100%. And by the way, what I just did on the screen, I just used ChatGPT to give us a framework for building a parent persona. I just used Montessori, for example, but just replace Montessori with anything you want. But I just said, give me a framework to share with a Montessori school to help build a parent uh, persona, not personal, for marketing missions messaging. They got the point. Who are they? I'll be honest with you. Let me talk through this. If you look up how to do parent personas or customer personas, it always says start with their age range. I think actually age range is important because how somebody in their 60s consumes content is a lot different than somebody in their 20s. So that's obviously very important. But are they married, divorced? Give them a name. They'll all tell you to do that. Many times I see schools and everybody get hung up on this part. I wouldn't worry too much about. I care more about, since we're building messaging around, what is it they want? What are their questions? How do we answer those questions in our messaging? So what do they value? Answering these questions. What keeps them up at night? Um, what are they searching for? How do they make decisions? So here you go. It'll even give you an example, right? So I don't want to spend too much time on this part. So I want to get in some other examples as we're winding down to the hour here. But just hopping into ChatGPT and doing this can really get you kick-started for doing this. And then once you get that data, then we bring that back to, I should probably put this next. Oops. Which is, then we got to get alignment around this. You got to get everybody on board with this. So you're going to build your personas, create your messaging around those personas, and then get everybody on board with it. Because if the teachers are saying something different than you're saying on a tour, that's a problem. That's a problem. Tim, I was going to start getting into some different frameworks that you really can't go wrong with. But before I do that, any other thoughts before we move on to some tactics?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is try to enlarge your screen if you can, because it's very small.
Yeah.
Anyone
Sorry.
can read it. And when we talk about using AI, you can go to some of these AIs for free,
Yep.
but my impression at least is that generally speaking, only the ones that are useful are the ones you pay for, like ChatGPT's $20 a month thing.
Yep. Yeah, I pay the 20 for ChatGPT. I think it's probably, of all the 1,000 subscriptions I pay for every single month for different things that you get billed for, and you're like, crap, I meant to cancel that. That's the one where it's like, I have to keep that one. I mean, it's the amount of time it saves is incredible at this point. So, and for this, it can help you think through these things, and don't just use it. I don't want to get into too much of a ChatGPT discussion, but how you use it isn't just, hey, give me this, give me the messaging for this type of family. Yes, it can do that, and it does a great job, but you can use ChatGPT as your own focus group. Hey, answer these questions for me as if you were a parent at this school. Or, hey, can you help me get the right questions I should ask in order to build a messaging framework to use on a website? Because when we start getting this messaging, where does this messaging live? It lives in our website. it lives in our ads, it lives in the emails that you send out, the flyers you create, and obviously, from the word of mouth from all the staff and administrators at the school. And but at least from, again, my marketing hat, when I'm building campaigns, it all starts with the messaging. I don't want to start with, well, yeah, let's run these ads here. Well, great, yeah, we'll run them there, but what's the messaging? And it has to start here. Let me show you some things. And again, you can use this with ChatGPT, or you can use it for your own, writing it out. But there are, in the marketing world, what are called copywriting frameworks, that they're kind of like fill in the blank frameworks that if you follow these, it gives you a really good foundation for copy that will resonate with your ideal family. The one that I use the most, and this is the one that I've seen work the best across ad campaigns, especially that drives the most engagement, clicks, and conversions, is something called problem, agitate, solution. State the problem, agitate the problem, provide your solution. Let me give you an example of one. I pulled this from a school, a campaign that's actually running inside of our platform. This has, we have benchmark data that we like to beat. Essentially, we know that the click-through rates of ads, we want to see above 1%. This particular ad got close to a 3% click-through rate and drove the most leads for this school. I say it all the time, Tim still holds the record for highest click-through rate and leads from a campaign, at over 10% click-through rate. Where, you talked about, hey, you don't come to our school looking for the best facilities and the football team, and Tim interrupt me, but that was specifically about repelling those that are looking for something that we don't offer, but attracting those that are like, this is what I want. Right. Tim, do you want to talk about just that messaging real quick? That's not what we're seeing on the screen. I'll get into what we're seeing on the screen,
Yeah.
but I want to.
Well, I think that the specific ad, we used a lot of them to do it, but the one you're talking about is proudly no football team at our high school since 1984. That's the one that got the most attention in a southern state where football is king. So what I was clearly trying to do is attract those families that think football is a dangerous sport that high school shouldn't be offering. So clearly a kid
Yeah.
that wants the traditional American football experience is not going to be happy at a small high school. You gotta find the right people for your school.
Yeah, exactly. And to the point here of, you know, attracting those families that are looking for something specific. Let's go back to what we said before about, let's use the example of college prep, but replace that with anything you want. This was a school that they realized, like, hey, in our ads, we need to call that out more. We need to say families come here because their child's going to get into a really great college. But they were also like, oh, but we want to also talk about how we have a great community and we're inclusive and things like that. So it was a balance, right? Because they didn't want to say, like, we're going to get your kid into Harvard in kindergarten, but they wanted to say, you're going to get a great education here. So this follows the problem, agitate, solution framework. So let's state the problem. You want your child to be challenged, supported, prepared for college, but not at the expense of their well-being. Too many high schools create pressure cooker environments where students are rewarded for their performance, not growth. Problem. It's all about tests, test prep, and transcripts, leaving little room for self-discovery, creativity, connection. Result: burnout, boredom, and kids who lose their love of learning. Let's agitate the problem. So here's the problem with that, and then here's the solution. Our name, here's what we offer. I actually don't really like the word rigorous, but we offer an academic experience grounded in respect, community, and purpose. This ad did really well. So if you follow, so let me go back to the frameworks tab here, and I'll share this with everybody. If you follow this framework, you really can't go wrong. And especially if you have the data, go into ChatGPT and say, write me an ad, build me a landing page, write me copy for my homepage based upon problem, agitate, solution framework, and it will. Right? Choosing the right school can feel overwhelming. right? Maybe you live in an area where there's a great school every 2 blocks. I'm in a suburb of Philadelphia. You drive down the street, you're running into the top 2 public schools in the state and about 10 different private schools that offer different things and have different, but they're all great. They're all similar price range. They're all great. It just depends on what you're looking for. And so if you want to differentiate, this is one of those ways where, hey, we know there's a lot of options in our area and it can feel overwhelming. You're trying to find the right school. If you choose the wrong school, you know that your child's going to be upset, whatever. This is why families choose us. So if you're looking for that, come here, right? So problem educate solution. Another common one. So like when I'm working with a school and helping them with their messaging, um, problem educate solution we're doing, and typically we call AIDA, AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. Another really great framework that you can't go wrong. None of these you can really go wrong with, but these are, if we're building 4, 5, 6 different variations, it's usually going to come down to these two. And so, what if your child couldn't wait to go to school? At our school, we blend academic excellence with joy-filled learning. Families choose us because their kids come home excited and thrive in the long term. Again, this is pulled from Chat. I told ChatGPT these are the copy frameworks. Give me some examples to use in a presentation. So help me with it. 4 Ps: problem, promise, proof, proposal. Your child's potential is too important to leave the chance. We help students unlock their potential through personalized learning. 95% of our graduates attend their first choice high school. Come see what makes us different, right? Now we want to get more detailed than this, but that gives a good start. Features, advantage, benefits. Story brand. This is another big one. You could put a note in here that says story brand. Excuse me. This is really great for websites. The story brand framework. It was created by a guy named Donald Miller. He's written multiple books on this. Again, can't go wrong in terms of building out a story brand framework for your website. Golden Circle, probably we've all heard of Simon Sinek and his famous TED Talk about finding your why. You can build messaging around that. And then the before and after bridge. This is kind of like what I was putting together before, which was this framework with this frowny face, smiley face. We're building a bridge before and after, and we build the bridge. So before our school, mornings were full of tears and stress. Now our daughter jumps out of bed excited to go learn. Here's how we do it. We do it through X, Y, and Z. So I will share this in the chat with everybody. Anyone with the link, you can be a viewer, so just copy it and download it. I'll put this in the chat. So that's in the chat. I know we're coming up on the hour. Questions, and by the way, I just want to say, hey, Rebecca, good to have you on here. Hope you're doing well. But any questions, anything you want to go over? Tim, certainly, if there's anything we didn't go over, you think we should?
I think we should tell them about what's coming up.
Just tell them what's coming up.
Well,
So
Thursday, we're doing
yeah,
I'm doing a webcast as part of our Independent School Leaders Leadership Forum. I'm doing one on creating stronger summer programs for your school, something I'm a great believer in. So while it's too late for this summer, you may pick up some ideas for the future. And it'll be more in depth than the typical talk on that subject is. We also have summer leadership workshops coming up in July, right?
yeah, end of July, we're going to be putting on some multi-day workshops. Some of the topics are going to be building out a marketing plan, building out your advertising campaigns. Tim, on your end, I know we talked about building a family-friendly school and community. I think we're going to have probably 4 or 5 different multi-day workshops. So what I would say is certainly keep an eye on your email, especially over the coming days. We've got a lot of really cool stuff coming that we just think again will be helpful, whether it's the new forum and community that we're going to have where you can engage with hundreds, if not thousands of other school leaders. We've got our Tuesday webcast, which we're on. We've got our Thursday webinar. We've got our workshops. And then, if anybody wants to really just cut through it all, get to the meat and potatoes and say, hey, help me execute X, Y, and Z. And, if you need help with your messaging, your strategic planning, you need professional development done at your school and more hands-on. That's what Tim and his team is fantastic at. So contact Tim. If you need the software to help execute that, we have our all-in-one software to run ads, streamline your admissions, automations, your email, everything is all in one spot now. So you can go to, so for us, go to getames.co. You can always sign up for a demo. And then for Tim, Montessori.org. Go to Montessori.org, contact Tim there, or you can always just hit a reply to any email you've ever received to get here, and we can hop on a call and talk about how we can help.
Absolutely. And again, even though we speak Montessori, we're polylingual. So, work with a lot of parochial schools and Christian schools and Jewish Orthodox schools and progressive schools. I come from a family that were among the leaders of the independent school community of Washington, D.C. And so that was my parents, and that's what I grew up around. So I'm kind of used to a multi-hundred private school community of very, very diverse schools. Anyway, it's really been great having you all on. For those of you who sat there and stayed quiet and ate your lunch, we're glad you came. Hope you're all well. We'll hopefully see some of you on Thursday. I think you may enjoy it for the courses that we're going to offer. They will be like what we're doing here, except they'll be much more tightly organized. And unlike these sort of freewheeling discussions, we'll try to make sure that you come away with some tangible takeaway that's worth the investment of time and whatever the webcast or the course cost is. Bottom line is we do professional development at the Montessori Foundation. We're actually connected to a number of universities. We would love to continue to get to know you through the webcast that we do on Tuesdays and on Thursdays. I'd love to get to know you through the forum that Clint is launching with us next week. And we hope to see some of you at the summer leadership courses. So I think that's it for this week, right, Clint?
That's it.
All right. We'll see you all next week or on Thursday.
Thank you so much, guys.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you, Jody. We really appreciate you coming in and chiming in.
Take care.